Hi, thank you very much. My name is Patrick from Bioledger. Bioledger is a startup. We built a blockchain database to enable oil companies and biofuel producers, farmers and waste collection companies to track their consignments of sustainable biofuels from the point of creation to the point of consumption. I'm here thanks to the Digital SME Alliance, who invited me to speak. And I'm here to represent the view of a digital startup that was born during the great economic resets of the COVID and the climate crises. I suppose those two crises represent an opportunity. In digital terms, it's the great turn the machine off and turn it on again and see if it works. And because we were born in that period of 2019, 2020, we've been able to implement those new environments and that future outlook into both our operational infrastructure and into our business model. In terms of our team, we were able to build green and a digital team because everyone was working from home. And that's the new business model that I think all European policies and supportive financial frameworks consider, that we are really operating in a truly borderless European Union with efficient access to people and a lower carbon workforce. So we've been able to, as a company, make a commitment to net zero carbon in 2023, including science-based targets, and we can do that by switching to 100% renewable electricity at home, zero carbon data centers, and no flying. And for us, that's simple. We started at zero carbon, and we hope to maintain that as we grow. In terms of the business model, it's a really exciting conversation to be part of. We again grew up in a global paradigm where we have a new economic factor which is being imposed on the world's businesses, who are being forced to commit to net zero carbon in the next few decades in order to avert the climate crisis. And that therefore puts a value on decarbonizing operations and accounting for all of the external environmental and social impacts that have caused these climate crises. And as part of that, oil companies, companies who create tissue paper or glass or who fly planes now have to have visibility on their supply chains. They need to be able to account for those environmental externalities, and they can compete on reducing those environmental costs. So while that might be a new factor for lots of businesses whose primary objective is something else, it's been my bread and butter for the last 12 years. I worked for the UK's largest fuel supplier. They supply somewhere near 30% of the petrol and diesel in the UK. And as part of that, they have an obligation under the Renewable Energy Directive to blend at least 10% sustainable biofuels in 2020. And my job was to fly around the world and inspect farms and plantations and biofuel producers for compliance with the sustainability criteria of that Renewable Energy Directive. Every single litre of the 25 billion litres of biofuel supplied into petrol stations across Europe today each litre needs to be traceable back to the point of origin. And at the point of origin, the supply chain needs to be able to quantify the life cycle carbon emissions through the supply chain and demonstrate that there's been no negative land use change or loss of biocarbon or loss of biodiversity. And there are other social criteria too. So that was my job. And over the years, with commercial and other regulatory stakeholders, we worked together to agree accounting practices to track every litre and every gram of CO2 in that supply chain. I guess one thing, the European Union is very good at setting rules for market entry and embedding science-based accounting practices into those market requirements. And then they impose those on businesses, and the oil sector and the biofuel sector were able to deploy those sustainability requirements and accounting practices throughout the international supply chain, whether it was used cooking oil being collected in China or sugarcane being grown and harvested in Brazil. We employed those accounting practices in 7,000 companies across the world in 150 countries. And with that quantity of transactions and the data sets that are required to pass that sustainability information along the supply chain, digitization was inevitable. Suppliers needed to be able to validate their procurement choices faster. So we developed automated tools to be able to check satellite data, to validate previous land use change. We agreed carbon accounting practices, and so that suppliers could see their performance, buyers could see the performance of their suppliers, and each node along the supply chain was able to optimize their performance to compete with their competitors, because that carbon saving had a value in Europe, in the European market. And unfortunately, in 2019, the system for accounting was demonstrated to be weak in terms of the Dutch authorities identified a major fraud event where over 300 million euros worth of biofuel was sold into the market with counterfeit sustainability evidence. And that can happen anywhere where environmental value is commoditized and passed along the supply chain. And that drove the creation of Bioledger, really. We knew that all of that data needed to be digitized so that it was immutable, it was protected, it was transferred efficiently, and that the appropriate people with the appropriate permission had access to validate that data. And that's why we built the blockchain database for biofuels in 2020. Our apps, our mobile apps now allow people to record those, whether it's a farmer in Argentina or in Germany, the farmer can record the geolocation and the sustainability evidence of their production chain and pass that along the supply chain to the consumer and the regulator. The digitization of the supply chain, in order to protect against fraud, the digitization of that supply chain information will become mandatory under the Renewable Energy Directive in 2023. But it was important for industry to be able to develop, to allow industry to develop interfaces and data sets that were useful for real life scenarios. A driver collecting used cooking oil does not need a whole complex interface. They need big, simple buttons to be able to perform that job while they're in a vehicle in the middle of the night in a city in Europe. And so we've got the European Commission will build a central European Union database for biofuels, but industry and Bioledger in particular are trying to ensure that we agree standardized data sets and methods to integrate data from third-party private data providers so that we can respond to consumer demand for changing interfaces. We can cater to the 7,000 companies in 150 countries, and with all due respect, we don't think that that should be the role of the European Commission to respond to a mobile app failure in Canada or China in the middle of the night. So we're happy to take on that responsibility and develop creative solutions to make that process efficient. So we're able to support millions of users from day to day. And as the saying goes, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. For us, digitization is just a pathway. Environmental sustainability was commoditized and had a value in the biofuel sector. Green is the primary objective of Bioledger, of the biofuels industry. And I guess if we consider that digitization is just a pathway, then we need to then quantify the environmental impacts that we want business to achieve. And business can come up with those creative solutions to allow business to quantify, review that data, and make informed, intelligent decisions on how business will improve. The feedback that we have had so far, so compliance with digitization in the biofuel supply chain will be mandatory in 2023, but the feedback from suppliers so far has been hugely positive. Tracking their supply chain has allowed them to be able to make intelligent decisions and optimize their logistics, their operations, their waste management. And at the end of the day, the resource efficiency, which is an environmental objective, is also doubly good for business. So with values now being imposed on carbon, businesses will need digital solutions to account for and improve their performance. And the net zero carbon commitments that were widely publicized in 2020 now need to be validated and improved starting from today. So companies will need to understand whether they have slave or child labor, deforestation, or polluting commodities in their supply chains. And I think that digital technologies are the only way to achieve that effectively. It has to be implemented at the lowest economic impact. And again, digitization is vastly superior to the armies of auditors that we have across those 150 countries and people managing analog pieces of paper and transferring them through the supply chain. So yeah, big technology might be the ones to deliver these solutions, but I think that Europe needs to take advantage of this opportunity and acknowledge that the unicorns of the future may be SMEs that will deliver the next SAP or Sage of carbon accounting, the next eBay of carbon credits, or the next Exxon of clean energy provision. So it's exciting to be part of this conversation, and looking forward to it. Yeah, thank you.